Okay, we're live. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to the people. With us today, we have Dan Whitfield. He's an independent candidate running for the U.S. Senate in Arkansas against Tom Cotton. Dan, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me, John. I appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, you're very welcome. You know, this will be the first opportunity on the program where we get to talk with someone running for office as an independent. But before we get into the policy platform you're running on and why you wanted to step up to run for Senate, I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. What were you doing before you decided to run for office, or are still doing today while you are on the campaign trail, as a full-time job?
Yeah, for sure. So I am a working class American. For the last 5 years on the weekends, I've been delivering pizzas for Domino's for extra cash. I'm a full-time student pursuing my computer science degree. I actually just finished my Associates of Applied Science magna cum laude, and I'll be transferring to the U of A next semester. And then I also work right now full-time at JB Hunt corporate headquarters in IT. Basically working in automation. I automate our software for us. So yeah. I'm pretty busy.
I was going to say that on top of a campaign is going to keep you all the time. So I'm so glad we get this time today. So what inspired you with all those varieties of backgrounds to step up and run for the Senate against Tom Cotton and what would have been a Democrat until they dropped out?
Absolutely. So what really inspired me was Senator Bernie Sanders. He gave a speech a few years ago where he said, I've started a political movement. I've shown you as much of the corruption as I can, and now it's up to you to do something about it. And that's what really woke me up. I was actually a registered Republican for 12 years before that point. And, I started using websites like votesmart.org and opensecrets.org, and looking at how my representatives were voting, where they were getting their money from, and where they were actually spending their money as well. And when I started to see all of this, basically legislators putting themselves up for sale in exchange for voting on legislation that hurts us directly, that's when I decided that I had to do something. And that's why I decided to run for U.S. Senate against one of the most corrupt senators in America.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. That's the biggest thing that I personally give Bernie Sanders credit for, too, is saying, look at the money. Look at where these people are aligned. It's not with you, the people. It's with us. And frankly, in that 2016 run, I frankly loved his approach, kind of like what you're doing, is running a little bit more independent leaning. That was a point where he was an independent senator from Vermont, and he kind of took that into the primary against what was the Democratic establishment. So I'd love to hear, Bernie Sanders being that awakening force, would you say you champion similar parts of his platform? What would you say are some of those top 3, top 5 issues that you're trying to run for in your campaign?
So the most important thing in my campaign as a representative for Arkansas, which is the 49th richest state in America, the only state more poor than us is Mississippi, is Medicare for all. It's very, very important we get Medicare for all passed. Now, it was a terrible idea to name it Medicare for all because it's not like Medicare for all. You don't need supplemental insurance.
I love this point.
Yeah. But, for here specifically in Arkansas, the average household income is $40,000 a year. 40 grand, that's it. Now, Medicare for all, it's not free. It's not a handout. Nothing's free, and you do pay for it. And the way that you end up paying for it is you pay 4% of your salary after $29,000 a year. And what that means, in short for Arkansans, the average Arkansan family will pay about $440 for an entire year's worth of medical coverage, which eliminates insurance premiums, deductibles, copays, and it'll be up to $200 per year for prescription drug costs. So, that's for your whole family. That's insane. I work at JB Hunt. My wife also works at JB Hunt. We would have what you consider good insurance, but we pay $860 a month for our insurance, and we have a $1,500 deductible. So we have to give Blue Cross Blue Shield $11,000 a year before it even benefits us having their insurance. That's a lot of money, and it's really important. Medicare for all, of course, that is my most important policy point. We know the number one cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt. It's not a myth. It's not a guess. It is a fact. And one of the terrible things about that is 70% of those people who file bankruptcy because of medical debt have medical insurance. They're going to work, they're paying their insurance premiums, they're paying their deductibles, they're doing everything the right way or what they're told is the right way. And then they get sick and they lose everything.
Yeah.
You can literally lose your house when you get sick, and you've been doing everything right, a contributing member to society. So Medicare for all is extremely important. And for one of the poorest states in America, it is even that much more important that we get all of our Kansans, this same opportunity. So that would be Medicare for all, my number one policy stance. The next thing we really have to start looking at is climate change and the Green New Deal. We have to have a federal jobs guarantee. If somebody wants to work, they should be able to work. And we should make sure that they're getting paid enough money to give them that incentive to want to work, which is also why I support a $15 an hour minimum wage. And if we had a federal jobs guarantee that was paying $15 an hour, then these other employers would have to, what's the word I'm looking for, compete with that as well and raise up their salaries. So we have to make sure that people are able to afford the lifestyle of Americans in 2020.
Sure.
You start looking at 70% of Americans can't even afford a $1,000 emergency. And this was all pre-COVID.
Yeah.
40% of Americans are working full-time, paycheck to paycheck. It's just the working class has been dwindling down. The richest 0.1% has been getting super rich. Just since the pandemic, they've made like $400 or $500 billion, while a lot of people have lost a lot. So we really have to start looking at the Green New Deal as far as the federal jobs guarantee portion of it, and then also taking on climate change. Climate change is the most important issue we will face and our children will face. And it is an existential threat to the point where, our planet may not be habitable for our future generations to come. Have you seen that dust storm coming over right now from the Saharan Desert? I mean, that's insane. Yeah. We're literally going to have a dust storm here in Arkansas from Africa, and it's going to be sitting over our state for several days. I mean, things like this just don't happen. And we're experiencing climate change and the really negative effects of it here in Arkansas, all the way from these giant out-of-season storms to historical flooding every single year, to giant tornadoes in areas that normally don't get tornadoes. And that's just what we are experiencing here as Arkansans. And then you start to look at how the wildfires in Australia last year, we lost 1 billion animals in just a few months. 1 billion animals. They're saying the koala bears could be extinct from the wild. So there's
media doesn't get them first. Yeah, you're right. That's right. The big thing. So, I wanted to clarify with you, Dan, on those two before I go into the third issue that you had before. I'd love to focus on two parts there. First, with Medicare for All, I'd love for you to dive a little bit more onto that point of why you think Medicare for All is the inappropriate branding. And then secondly, the single payer system in which Medicare for All exists, how do you think we help that transition for the people who are already on insurance plans today?
So, people always say we want Medicare for all who want it, kind of thing. We don't want to lose our private insurance. We want to have that option. At the same time, those people who feel that way, for the most part, don't really understand what Medicare for All is and how much money they're going to be saving. When you have family A living next door to family B, and they have basically the same insurance coverage, except one is spending $500 or maybe $1,000 a year, and one's spending $5,000 or $10,000 a year for the same coverage, yeah, they're probably going to end up switching over to Medicare for All. They just don't know. And we have to make sure that it's really hard, man. They're paying people a lot of money to come up with solutions for this problem. And the best way that I can think about it is, we know what the problem is. We know we have to find a solution, but no matter what we do, it can't be worse than what's going on right now. It's not like it's going to raise bankruptcies or it's going to ruin families. It's shown that it's going to save us money. It's going to save lives, and we just need to do it. I mean, we're America. We are the great experiment. So we need to just dive right, nose first, right into Medicare for All and see if it works. And I mean, from the people who have been paid a lot of money and who have spent their entire lives researching single payer systems, they think that that's the right answer. So we should give this a shot. We really should. And I mean, we're the only modernized nation in the entire world not to be using some sort of single payer or another. Every country has their own. No two countries are the exact same, and we will fit our own to match our society and our population and our way of life. So we just have to go straight into it for Medicare for all. What was the other question?
Well, I wanted to hear, before I go to the second part of the question, I'd love to clarify on that point that you just made. Essentially, we have every country in the industrialized world, all the OECD nations have universal healthcare. Not all of them necessarily have single payer. You can look at Canada, which has that. You can look at the UK that has that, Germany that has that. There are several countries that do. But all of them have a universal system, whether that's a public option that's basically free that people can choose and then go above that or not. And the thing I wanted to clarify is, a jobs guarantee, which was the second point that you brought up, and we'll explore in a little bit, is basically like a public option for jobs. You can always take that job, and then it competes and it forces all the other job providers to have to supply a job at that quality or better. Why do you think that is not the appropriate method as at least, a transitionary vehicle? Get more people enrolled into Medicare, improve Medicare, and then you later on can transfer it into a single payer system compared to a bill that says in 4 years with age drops each year of 10 years at a time.
So there's a specific reason for that. The specific reason for that is because Medicare for all only has that low price point if everybody's doing it. I mean, we can try something else where we can start a transitionary period over the next, say, 4-8 years or whatever the politicians want to do.
Sure.
And the problem is it's going to be more expensive for the people who do want to take part in it first, because the whole point of it is it spreads the cost out. So it can lower the overall cost for everybody.
Why would it be more expensive in your opinion? Because let's say everyone was paying it. It's a public option. You can be on the plan and say that Medicare is my provider. It covers X, Y, and Z services. Or you could choose your other plan. But we all fund it like we do with public schools, right? Everyone has the right to go to public schools. We all fund it. Some states have made the choice, in my opinion, incorrectly, to allow you to opt out of that taxation to go fund charter schools or private schools. But most states, you just fund your public school. And if you want to go to a private school, you pay more to get access to that. Why should we have that single payer that, removes the duplicative coverage, in your opinion? Because, some of the plans out there, like Tulsi's or Andrew Yang's had said, let's do Medicare for all, essentially, but let's not ban duplicative coverage. Do you think there's an advantage of banning duplicative coverage?
There is, because then it gives us the ability and the power to negotiate the pricing. If we have all these different groups, then they can still negotiate at different prices. But if we have one way, then our government can pretty much say, we're not going to be paying you $300 for a vial of insulin if we can, get it for $50 a vial up in Canada. This is going to be the set price. And the more parties you start bringing into it, the more they can change that price, the less power they'll have over negotiations. Like I said, it's a really hard issue because we have 330 million people here in America. There's a lot of people, and it is going to be a lot different than another universal system. Again, they pay a lot of, they pay people a lot of money who have spent their entire lives and careers researching this, and I have not. So all I can do is just listen to an expert, take their advice, and try to comprehend what they're trying to say.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point. And compared to the existing system, Medicare for all is definitively a better system. It's shown in a variety of studies to save anywhere between $2 trillion and $15 trillion over a 10-year period of time, with a meta-analysis showing $5 trillion in savings in total. So I totally agree with you there. I now wanted to clarify the federal jobs guarantee a little bit. This is something where I personally think there's a lot of sense that anyone who wants to work should be able to work. How do you think something like that can be administered? Like, how do we determine what jobs there are in that system, in your opinion? Like, what types of jobs are you looking for, and who is deciding what those jobs are?
Well, I think one of the important things that we really have stopped talking about over the last few years is our infrastructure. We have to start building our infrastructure. We used to have the, conservation corps who would come in. They built schools, they built national parks, and they built post offices and all these other important community buildings. And we just don't have that anymore. Our schools are falling apart. Our roadways are falling apart. Bridges Flint, Michigan, they're still paying for poison water. there are jobs out there. We just have to create the programs to utilize people's ability. I mean, and anybody can go work a construction job if you really want to. And because what I'm trying to say is, I guess anybody can learn how to do it.
Sure.
You know, and if we offer enough of an incentive and give people enough money to want to go and do it, to, you know, I hate to say it, but want to get off their ass and go work, then they will go do it. Another thing I think that we should end up doing kind of along those lines is we need to make sure that as far as drug testing, we need to get rid of cannabis drug testing for position. Because there are a lot of people who want to work in their fields, in their industries, who are probably not going to go get that job that's going to help, you know, benefit society more than going and working somewhere else where they can smoke a little bit of pot, especially in these legal states. I know Nevada recently went to do that, which is really cool, and their economy is going to grow, you know, in a really quick way because of it. But we got to get people working in their specialties, and getting rid of that drug testing, I think, is going to help. Getting people the ability or the availability of jobs through a federal jobs guarantee. And again, this is just people who want to work but can't find a job, you know, the unemployed. And I work in automation, so I kind of see where we're going with the future of our society firsthand. And people don't realize how bad our unemployment is going to be. Andrew Yang realizes it. That's why I think for sure one day he will be our president, because he understands the problems we're facing. He's just a little bit ahead of his time because everyone else has to catch up to what's going on. But they're talking by 2035, we could have a 40% unemployment rate.
Yeah.
And those are really important figures, especially when you look at the Great Depression's 25%. And now I think we're looking at 20% unemployment right now. So we have to make sure that there is the availability for people to work that want to work.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I'd love to have you field one of the concerns I've been hearing as I've embraced this. You know, a lot of people are concerned that due to automation, a lot of these jobs that would be provided by a guarantee would just be less efficiently done by humans compared to by automation, robotics, etc. How do we try to provide an efficiency to this jobs guarantee? How do we administer this so that we're not just, you know, saying you're getting a job for the sake of just survival, getting that paycheck that way? Do you think that there is going to be new jobs that can be part of this jobs guarantee that are not going to be easily replaced by robotics?
Well, I think what it's going to come down to is better education. We have to make sure that people can go to college and get a degree, especially a computer science degree or information systems, something like that, where they can work on this automation, because those jobs are still going to be there. We're going to have people writing scripts, automating the scripts, and maintaining them. So we have to make sure we have accessible and affordable education for everybody. I do support the elimination of student debt, $1.6 trillion. If we can build, I mean, just even the COVID-19, we built the Wall Street out, what was it, like $6 trillion?
Yeah. And we gave trillions in repo loans on the daily. So yeah, you're right. We got the money to do it.
We do. And we just have to have the want. And a lot of the blowback I get from that is, well, when I went to school, I worked my full-time job, went to school, and I came out with no loans, blah, 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 got a job. Well, yeah, times are different. You know, the cost of college is so much higher. Just in the last 10 years, we've seen textbook prices go up 1,000%. Just in 10 years. So when someone maybe 20 or 30 years ago was able to go and get, say, a law degree for $5,000, now you're looking at least $15,000, $20,000 a semester. So, you know, times are different. We have to make sure that we are eliminating student debt so that people can stop having to worry about that and having that debt hold them back, ruin their credit, keep them from being able to get low interest loans on, say, houses and cars and credit cards and things like that. Now, also, I do support free college tuition up to 2-year university, you know, a 2-year college, a 2-year degree. That way, you know, you can go and get your associates, and it's the same for a trade school. So you can either go and get your associates in whatever field. You can go to a trade school, and it's no cost to you. And that's not going to raise taxes. A lot of people are like, well, I don't want to pay more taxes for that. At a 1% speculation tax, it pays for every child in America to go to school. And then offer, if a student has a 3.5 GPA, to continue to their bachelor's degree at no cost.
Nice.
That way you have incentive to do good in school, to pay attention, take everything seriously. And as long as you're taking it seriously and you're going to benefit our society, then you should be able to continue at no cost.
Yeah.
And that's just my opinion as a student.
No, I love that incentive plan, frankly, because I've heard that concern from even my own like parents. They've had this concern where it's saying, why should I be paying for someone to go in and potentially just keep coasting? And they're not actually trying. I want to invest in people to get an education, but just the ones that really want to put in the effort. And so, we could obviously debate here and there, 3.5, 3.0, what that line is. But in general, I like that incentive to force people to focus on their studies. I'd like to
work.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'd love to transition into the aspect of, you're an independent. This is the first one we've had on our program. And so I'd love to hear in your perspective of, you're running right now against just Tom Cotton. The Democrat had dropped out of their race. How are you expecting to go into that race now running through the fall and trying to appeal to the voters of Arkansas that has a little bit more of a right bent? What are some of those issues that you tried to appeal to conservatives with to come to your side?
So real quick, we're at about 21 minutes right now.
Yeah.
I'm not on a time constraint. Are you on a time constraint?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
All day.
I can talk forever. So real quick, circling back, that's a great question, and I would love to answer that for you in detail. But let's circle back real quick to automation, because that kind of brings in the UBI that I wanted to talk about as well. As we get to that point where we're going to have 40% of people unemployed, and then the people who are employed are going to have a degree to, work in our society and better it, we're going to have to make a choice where large corporations that normally have, we'll say 1,000 people doing a specific job, and now they only need 10 people to do that same amount of work while keeping the same amount of profits. We're going to have to decide, are we going to allow these corporations to get rid of all of their labor overhead and make trillions and trillions of dollars? Or are we going to use that opportunity to tax that money, tax them for each worker that they no longer have to pay, and put that money into a UBI pool? And that's kind of what I see as far as UBI in the future, because it will be very necessary. We're going to have to decide as a society, do we let corporations make trillions or quadrillions, or do we make society better and make sure that everybody can afford to eat? That there's no, child going hungry. Here in Arkansas, we have a really bad poverty rate. 1 in 4 children go to bed with a hungry stomach in Arkansas. 1 in 4, 25% of kids live in poverty here. It's terrible.
Yeah, and so SNAP is not doing nearly enough for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is something that I do have on my mind and I'm thinking about all the time. All right, so back to running as an independent. So real quick, I am not the only opponent for Tom Cotton. There is a libertarian running. But I don't really agree with the libertarian platform. I kind of consider it as Republican light. I guess Republicans would rather, I can't really say that. Let's see here. Republicans want a small government, and libertarians want no government, kind of is what it comes down to. No regulation, no oversight. And I think that, especially representing Arkansas, one of the poorest states, we have to make sure we're protecting programs like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, CHIP, WIC, and all these other ones, as well as the EPA funding and things like that. So there is a libertarian running, which is really amazing, because you see the media saying Tom Cotton's unopposed. Well, in really he's not unopposed at all. There are other people, just no Democrats.
That's a very bias there. Yeah,
and it is very rare to have a U.S. Senate race with no Democrat. And that's what is going to make me win this year. So it was very interesting what happened this whole process. In Arkansas, if you want to file to run for office, you have to file between 12 o'clock noon on November the 4th, the year before your election, between November the 4th at noon and November the 11th at noon.
Okay.
I was there early on November 4th. I was the first candidate to file for U.S. Senate. And then the Democrat filed, and then the Libertarian filed. And on November 11th, 1 hour after the filing deadline at 1 p.m., the GOP put out a press release. And this was, the national GOP, saying that they were launching an investigation into fraudulent FEC filings into the Democrats' candidate.
Okay.
1 hour after that, the Democratic candidate, without referring to his party or making, any kind of party decision, he withdrew from the race, stating family medical emergencies.
Okay.
I'm a student. One of his staffers worked or was a classmate of mine or went to my school. And he told me 1 hour after that is when Mahoney sent his lawyer to all of his campaign staffers' houses to sign non-disclosure agreements. So within 2 hours after the filing deadline, there was no more Democrat in the race. The next day, I believe it was the next day, the GOP put out another press release saying, we had this dirt on the Democrats since last May, a year ago, and we sat on it so that the Democrats would build support behind him. And then after the filing deadline, we get him to drop out. They said that publicly. That was their strategy. That was their strategy.
Republicans are good at playing dirty. They're sometimes a little maybe stupid in admitting that out loud, but they're smart at it.
And I mean, the Democrats, all of this dirt came out from his last run in 2018. They should have vetted him properly. They should have known about it. I think they did know about it. They just didn't say anything. But at the same time, the Democrats are responsible. But the GOP, I believe 100% I believe it was very unethical. It was very undemocratic, and they should be ashamed of themselves, honestly. They really should be for that kind of dirty strategy. But whatever, it got the Democrat out, and now I don't have to worry about splitting the progressive and the Democratic votes.
Yeah.
So they thought it was a great idea. That was their big strategy. Well, I think that was the worst thing they could have done for the race, because now it united the rest of the state together. I am a progressive independent. I support things like Medicare for All, Green New Deal, eliminating student debt, ending foreign wars. I'm really big about outlawing congressional lobbying and getting the financial corruption out of our government. That gives me the Democratic vote. I am an independent. I do support the Second Amendment. That's as far right as I go, is really the Second Amendment. That's kind of the only thing Tom Cotton and I do agree on. But I am not as far extreme as he is. He doesn't support background checks, and I do. I think background checks are very important, and we should have background checks for private-to-private sales. If you can't go to Bass Pro or Cabela's and buy a firearm because you can't pass a background check, you shouldn't be able to go on to Arms List and buy one, over the internet from someone either. We have to have background checks. And then, we can go on about that. I don't want to go too much into it. Yeah. But I'm offering direct democracy, which is something very unique.
Oh, I love direct democracy. That's refreshing to hear. Okay, go on.
So one of the things about my platform, the main thing about my platform is if 67% of my constituents want me to vote one way or another on a policy, I will vote in their favor, no matter how I personally feel about it.
Wonderful.
And I think that's very important. We are a representative republic. And my opponent did write a paper for his Harvard thesis stating how, senators are of a higher intellectual capacity and know what's better for people than, people do. But I disagree. I think, maybe when the Constitution was written around 250 years ago, yeah, they were absolutely right. We needed a representative.
We didn't have the technology at the time.
We
do.
Yeah. If something happened in New York, it would take months for someone in Florida to find out. Now, times are different. It's 2020. If something happens, we have the freedom of information. We have the encyclopedia on our phones. We have the most powerful computers in our pockets. We have that freedom of information. At the same time, back then, less than 1% of the population had a college degree. People weren't educated. How would they know, consequences and the reactions for actions they make? Times are different. I don't think that we need someone to tell us what's best for us. I believe we have the ability to understand and comprehend what is best for us and our families. So that is very important to me. When it comes, the reason I brought that up with Second Amendment is a lot of times I get the question of, do you want to ban AR-15s and assault weapons? Well, of course, the first question is, what's an assault weapon? Are you talking about an automatic weapon, a fully automatic weapon? Sound suppressors? What are you talking about? Because realistically, to buy a fully automatic weapon, you have to have a tax stamp. It's expensive. It's a very thorough FBI background investigation. Not a lot of people own fully automatic weapons. You just can't go buy, a fully automatic AK or something like that. Now, so what is an assault style weapon? People like to refer to an AR-15. It's a semi-automatic most of them fire a 9mm 227, something like that. But do we ban all semi-automatic weapons? Now you're looking at a handgun. That my handgun that I carry to protect my family, it holds 15 rounds, and I can fire all those rounds in the clip in about maybe 3 seconds accurately. And I mean, so are we going to ban handguns? So it's really hard. How do we look at that? The $1 million question is, how do you get firearms out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them?
Exactly.
And background checks. That's really got to be it. But so, yeah. And as an independent, that does help supporting the Second Amendment here in Arkansas. We like to have our firearms, and we don't like to have our constitutional rights taken away.
Yeah. So I don't want to dig too much into gun control, but I want to ask one question on it.
Absolutely.
Do you support gun licensing? As a step to the, you have to background check the individuals who are getting the gun, but do you want to have a registry of the actual guns themselves so that this was registered to this individual, it was sold illegally to someone else, we can now trace it back to them?
Man, what it comes down to is the Patriot Act, honestly, or the Freedom Act that our Senate just reauthorized a month ago. I'll tell you this. We know for a fact our government has all of our text messages, our voicemails, our emails, our call history, our access to all of our social media, what our favorite color is, what kind of porn we watch. They know everything about us. Yeah. I guarantee you they have a registry of who owns a firearm, because when you buy one from the store, it does a background check and it gets saved somewhere. They have a registry. It may not be public knowledge, may not be accessible to the public, but they do have it. At least if we had an official gun registry, we could regulate it to make sure that information didn't get into the wrong hands.
I think that's very fair, because otherwise, frankly, if you have that public registry where everyone can have access to it, well, people that own firearms can become targets for theft. People can go to those homes and want to steal those guns because now they know that's there, and guns are quite valuable on the black market. So that's a very common problem of how illegal ownership of guns happens in the first place, is theft. So I do understand that, but I think you're right. As long as there is some private registry, which I do believe needs to be established to kind of go hand in hand with the background checks, if you're right that they have that already, more than fine.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they do. If they have all of my text messages, I'm pretty sure they know I own a firearm. I mean, it's you the background check to get it.
That it gets to the question, like, how do you feel about just the Patriot Act in general? Like, obviously, it can be considered
BS, man. Yeah, complete BS. When it first passed, it had a purpose: to catch terrorists in America. Fact is, it hasn't caught almost any terrorists in America. All it's done is been used unconstitutionally for spying against law-abiding citizens without warrants. It was the biggest loss of privacy in American history. And we need to make sure that we go into the Patriot Act or into the Freedom Act, and we need to make sure that our constitutional rights are still there. I think there are a lot of things we need to change as far as our rights. I would like to see our personal property rights updated to include our digital data. If I'm looking at some kind of so my opponent, Tom Cotton's taken more than $1 million from the telecommunications industry. And he supported giving our internet service providers access to monitor, store, and sell our private internet data to third-party advertisers. And I think that is our personal property. And if they want to sell it to an advertiser, number one, I should have an option. And number two, I should get the check, not my internet service provider. And I think that's very important, but it doesn't get talked about enough. But that is a very important issue that should be brought up all the time, because, you can see this really clearly if you're on your phone and you search cruise to Hawaii, and then you go on your laptop and you search, or you just go into Facebook, you start seeing cruises to Hawaii pop up. That's because they monitored your data and then they sold it to an advertiser. And it's a big issue that nobody talks about. We need to make sure we get rid of mandatory term agreements. If you try to go to the hospital and you're like, you have to sign this paper, otherwise you're not going to get treated. Well, so I'm going to die, right? If I don't agree to your terms. You can't even use an iPhone without agreeing to their terms, which gives them the right to monitor, store, and collect all of your data. So we have to be careful with user term agreements and make them optional, like truly optional.
Mhm.
I mean, I can go on and on about our digital property. It's pretty
Such an
terrible.
important topic. And you know what? You're absolutely right that it needs to be elevated platform. And that's, again, one of the things that I'm thankful to Andrew Yang about is he launched this whole new data dividend project that he's trying to be able to champion data privacy as well as the right for us to be able to monetize our own data back to us. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to focus on these technology aspects. And frankly, I love the independent streak because this is true. We have to dismantle some of these invasions on our Constitution. Like, being a progressive doesn't mean we're not, for the Constitution. We want to enforce some of that stuff where we've overreached, just like this. But, I wanted to transition a bit now to kind of a strategy feeling. Like, let's say we're able to beat Tom Cotton. A lot of these things are very popular with the people. But right now we've seen, frankly, a lot of blockage when it comes to the Senate and Congress as a whole. What do you think is your approach if you were to be elected, getting in there and trying to start causing some change within the system when we're not going to necessarily have all of the progressive movement invade this cycle? We're going to get some through. We hope we get you through. But how do we get stuff done when we don't have that control in the Senate? What would you advise to the Progressive Caucus?
So being an independent gives me a unique position of leverage for votes. It gives me that swing vote. I know the other independents like Senator Bernie Sanders and Angus King, they kind of just caucus with the Democrats, and it's not really a swing vote per se. They usually vote with the Democrats most of the time. Well, I get the question a lot. Why am I not running as a Democrat? Why am I not running as a Republican? Why run as an independent? And it's a very simple answer for me. I believe that a representative should answer to their constituents and not a political party. Political parties, they tie hands. I mean, the whole definition of a political party is a corporation that helps candidates get elected to control the flow of government. I think the control of government should be controlled by the people and not a party. Now, I get the question a lot, am I going to caucus with the Democrats or am I going to caucus with the Republicans? It's a very, a reasonable question. We live in such a crazy time where our two parties are so divided and polarized. All they do is argue back and forth the aisle, on deaf ears. Nothing is really getting accomplished to help us. Mm-hmm. And we see this, it's really bad with Mitch McConnell right now as the majority leader. He's got hundreds and hundreds of bills sitting on his desks that they won't even vote on. So as an independent, I really want to be able to work across the aisle and listen to the Republicans, listen to their concerns, and relay their concerns with the Democrats, listen to their concerns. And I want to be able to work back and forth across the aisle to mediate solutions. And as an independent, I should be able to do that, especially to the point where representing more of a conservative state, I will have the ability where if a majority of my constituents want me to vote in one way, 67% of the voters, then I will caucus with the Republicans. I'll listen.
That's what I love. That's the beauty of direct democracy, Dan. That's why I love it so much. And frankly, that's why I think more people should be independents as a whole. Because you know what? This partisan game of what are we going to do to make the party look good? What are we doing to make sure that we're still favorable with the leadership group so that we get appointments is really tampering with the job, which is supposed to be representing the people, not representing party interests. So I think you're right. It's a false dichotomy to have to caucus with one or the other. We should be caucusing with the people.
Right. I completely agree. And I think a lot of that comes back to how our legislators get elected and who they really work for. Mm-hmm. When you look at just in 2018, 91% of candidates with more money got elected. Yeah. 91% of the time, if you had more funds, you win. Yeah. Now it's down to 86%. So we're moving slowly in the right direction. But the problem is we have these legislators taking millions and millions and millions of dollars from corporations and special interests. And then when the time comes where they have to choose on whether or not to vote for or against a piece of legislation, it can directly hurt their constituents. It's either the vote is going to hurt them or help them, but they're going to hurt them so that they can get that money coming in for their next reelection campaign. One of the things that I have announced and talked about is I'm not going to have a reelection campaign. I'm going to serve my term. Wow. My name will be on the ballot in 2026. And if I'm doing a good job, my constituents should vote for me without having to waste any of my time campaigning or any of their money campaigning. And if I'm doing a good job, then they'll elect me. Yes, that's why I don't have to take money from special interests. I'm actually 100% grassroots. All of my campaign donations have come from working class Americans. I don't take any money from political parties, political action committees, corporations, or billionaires. It's all just working class people. And I have complete financial transparency. So if you go to replacetomcotton.com, that's my website, there is a tab that says campaign, and then in the campaign tab it says donations spent, and you can see the spreadsheet where I've spent every single dollar, every penny that has been donated to my campaign.
That's bold. I love that. I love that.
And I hope that catches on. I think it's great, and that's the kind of transparency we need, especially like my opponent Tom Cotton. He's already spent $3.5 million on this campaign. Where has he spent $3.5 million? He doesn't have ads on TV. He hasn't shown his face in the state. The last town hall Tom Cotton did here in Arkansas was in 2017. February of 2017 was the last time he came and talked to, an open group of constituents here. So I think it's very important, the financial transparency aspect of it. I do support term limits, so I'll serve my one term. If I'm doing a good job, I won't run my re-election campaign. They'll vote for me, and I'll serve my second term. And after that, I'll go back to working at JB Hunter.
I like too for term limits. Yeah, I wish everyone had that before we even had it, but we don't, and that's why we need term limits. So, Dan, thank you so much for answering all my questions. I'd love to just take a little bit of time to answer some of my audience's questions that we have here currently in chat.
Absolutely.
So the first question I got is from Nelson Orta. He asked, there's approximately 1.2 million people who are incarcerated on the state level. What do you think the federal government can do to reduce state prison populations?
You asked me my question on my top 3 policies, and I'm sorry, I'm very passionate.
Oh, I interrupted you before.
I didn't even make it to number 3.
Yeah.
So my number 3 policy is the federal decriminalization of cannabis, including nationally expunging cannabis convictions. Very, very important to me. And that relates very directly with this question. So the United States right now, we have the highest, amount of people incarcerated per capita than any other country in the world, to the point where we have like a lot more people incarcerated.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are minor drug offenses. 80% of the people that are incarcerated for drug offense are drug possessions. They're not selling drugs. They're just maybe smoking some weed at home, and then they get arrested and they go to jail. Johnny Depp in Blow says it best. He's like, I got arrested. I went to jail with a minor in cannabis and came out with a master's in cocaine. And, we have a lot of people getting arrested, going to jail for these really minor drug offenses and coming out criminals. Here in Arkansas, we just recently authorized $169 million to go to a for-profit prison for LaSalle to house 500 people. 1/4 of the children in Arkansas are going to bed with a hungry stomach, and we authorized $169 million to house 500 people. We could just expunge 500 cannabis convictions. We just saved $169 million, and we could put all that money into hungry children's stomachs. I mean, there's so many more important things we could be doing right now than focusing on incarcerating people. One of the biggest problems, especially because when we look at how many people are incarcerated, what I usually look at is violent offenders versus nonviolent offenders, victimless crimes. And a lot of the people in jail are just there for possession, for drugs.
Yeah.
It was put there as a way to target minorities. We actually, back in, the early 1900s, when we had a lot of Chinese immigrants coming in, the common Chinese pastime was to smoke opium. So when they wanted to stop Chinese immigrants from coming in, what did they do? They made opium illegal. It's things like that. African Americans or Black Americans, their favorite pastime back in the day was smoking a little bit of weed. So what do you do when you want to incarcerate them?
Yep, that's
Make
the
weed illegal.
strategy. Yep.
And we need to, number one, we've got to federally decriminalize cannabis. I do believe that it should be up to the state's voters to vote on whether or not they want it to be, illegal, medicinal, or recreational. That should be up to the voters in each state, because every state is unique and different. But federally, it needs to be decriminalized. It cannot be a Schedule I drug. And a lot of those reasons are to protect our legal businesses. In California, we have the DEA going into dispensaries regularly They'll go into a dispensary, handcuff everyone inside, take them out, go in, take all their product, take all of their assets, their cash, and then they'll go out, they'll let everybody go and say, have a nice day. We'll see you in 6 months. And it's legal robbery. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
civil asset forfeiture is definitely looting. You know, they complain about that all the time right on the news with this whole protest ongoing, but we got it legalized by our criminal justice system already. It's just in one direction.
And that doesn't even go into the fact that they can't bank with federally insured banks.
Yeah.
So, and my opponent has voted against legislation that has been brought forward to make it so that legal businesses can store their money in federally insured banks. So there's a lot of reasons to do it. I'm not a pothead. I don't smoke weed, but I'm really passionate about this. A lot of people just be like, "Oh, you're just a pothead." Well, I work at JB Hunt. They do random hair follicle testing.
Yeah, like the thing is, it's a health thing at the end of the day. If we want people to stop utilizing it, let's help them get treatment. Let's help them feel comfortable coming forward and saying, "Hey, I'm using this, and let me get some help." And that goes beyond marijuana too. It comes for other drugs. I frankly am okay with the decriminalization of a lot of other drugs. Maybe not legalization where we have legal businesses selling it, but like come forward, come get help. You're not going to get arrested. One of the things I always love about this position is that, frankly, a lot of the times our jail system becomes our housing guarantee. It becomes our way that people who are on the streets right now are saying, how do I get a shelter over my head? We're not providing enough shelter. I'm going to commit a crime so I can go to jail and get a roof over my head. And so I think you're absolutely right. How do you have more people be productive? You don't put them behind bars.
Right. You make sure people have affordable housing. You stop gentrification. You make sure people have access to a good paying job. You make sure people have access to an education. You give people the stepping stones they need to succeed in life. You don't just, take them away and expect people to figure it out. Like one of the things, that a lot of conservatives want to do is they want to just take away all of our social safety nets. They just want to take the rug out from people.
Yeah. What do you expect them to do? Yeah.
I think the proper solution to that is start paying people enough money they don't qualify for welfare. Give them the opportunities.
Universal basic income does that.
Easy stuff. And there you go. Now you've weaned them off so they're no longer on it because they don't qualify for it anymore.
Yeah, and now they're no longer trapped by these income thresholds where they don't feel incentivized to work. You got this universal basic income regardless. I always find that this is just such a really moral issue because when you look at it, people behind bars aren't going to be effective unless we're truly going back to what's basically slave labor. We're paying them cents on the dollar, way below the minimum wage. So we're decreasing labor rates in the public market by doing this as well, because now you have to compare yourself to prison labor and the cost that prison labor provides. And furthermore, when you look at the total population, we have a big population. We're third in the world. But when you look at China, India, and Indonesia, number 1, number 2, and number 4 combined, they have 100,000 less prisoners than us combined.
Yeah.
So this is something we got to prioritize. And if you're doing a harmless offense, marijuana doesn't hurt anyone. We can arguably say studies, does it hurt yourself or not? But if it's hurting yourself, God, we allow you to drink. We allow you to smoke.
It's literally not killing yourself.
It's a harmless crime.
It's going to make you obese. But, realistically, we know alcohol, it shuts kidneys down. It kills your liver. It kills people. We know tobacco.
Opioids right now. We're having that same problem. That's one of our number one rising death tolls is opioid epidemic, and that's just a legalized drug. So I haven't heard of anyone who's died from marijuana. Maybe some actions while they've been high, like driving, which we should still have as illegal, just like we do with alcohol, but not the act of smoking itself. So I totally agree. That's a good common sense way for us to reduce the prison population. Yeah. Let's go to another question. This also comes from Nelson. I really like this one as well. He asked, is it more effective to pass a constitutional amendment or just state ballot initiative for reforming gerrymandering? We have to break this stranglehold where, frankly, the politicians right now are picking their voters rather than our voters picking the politicians all the time. How would you want to handle something like gerrymandering?
So this is something I think about all the time because my biggest thing is getting corruption out of government. How do we do that? Yeah. What can we do? We need to end gerrymandering. We need to outlaw congressional lobbying. One thing that I think when you join the military, you give up certain rights. I think when you run for public office, you should do the same. You should, number one, give up the right to the Fifth Amendment. You should not be able to not self-incriminate if you're a public servant. If you're a criminal and you don't like that, then don't run for office. Very simple. And I think you should also give up the right to own shares in the market. You shouldn't have a portfolio.
Yeah.
And, you know, you should have to liquidate your portfolio. And for your duration of time in office, when you're voting on legislation that can have a financial incentive to you, you shouldn't be able to do it. Now, gerrymandering is really tough. I think there are a few different things that we could do to address gerrymandering. Number one, we can't have parties choosing party, you know, congressional or district lines. We can't do that. It doesn't work. Yeah. We're actually experiencing that. It's really important here in Arkansas this year specifically, because the Democrats have always written the district lines in Arkansas. It's always been the Democrats. They've always been in control. This is the first year where the Republicans get to do it. So now the Democrats are upset and they're like, oh, we need to have a third party independent source come in and do it for us. Because they don't want the Republicans to have their turn, even though they've been doing it for decades themselves. So, I mean, it's really hard. I think one of the possible solutions would be have people from other states create your district lines. Disinterested parties. It's really hard. But I think, because how do you find someone who's nonpartisan? How do you find someone who's completely independent, like myself? It's not easy.
I mean, there's like you could do the shortest distance line method. You could do it by computer. You could do it by, frankly, I've always thought, what if you just let 5-year-olds draw the map? Like, what would that even come out with? They don't have any political interest. You know, the one thing I'd worry about in a plan like that is just, you know, as much as another state might be disinterested, like it still can go by party lines. The Democrats might still try to draw out for Democrats and use advising from the people within that state. I do think that we need a little bit more ways to kind of make it truly independent, which is really hard.
I think we can do that with our technology we have now. All we need is an algorithm that does not take into effect race, income, and it only takes into effect age. And then have a computer algorithm create district lines just based on age and population. If we did something like that, that would probably be a lot less open to, corruption and temptation to draw district lines in a way that might help one particular party or the other. But you'd have to make sure you don't have ethnicity. You can't have, income. You can't have party affiliation, anything like that. It would have to be completely neutral just based on population and age. But I think we could probably write an algorithm that could do something like that.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. I do think this is another one where we have technological solutions like direct democracy. This is something that's a lot more possible now. But with that being said, I wanted to thank the audience for their questions and Dan for being able to answer them. For those that enjoyed hearing you today and what you have to represent in your campaign, how can they help you be able to defeat Tom Cotton and that one libertarian you had mentioned beforehand? How can they get involved?
So my name is Dan Whitfield, and I'm the independent candidate running for United States Senate here in Arkansas. Our campaign is 100% grassroots. It's funded by the working class people. I would ask the first thing you should do is go to replacetomcotton.com. You should check out my issues. You should check out my platform. I wrote an autobiography, just a short one about myself, kind of who I am, how I grew up, and what got me to where I am today. Just read about me a little bit. And if you like what you see, just please donate. Because right now our average donation is like $27, which is as grassroots as it gets. It's more grassroots than that. You can even, like I said, on replacetomcotton.com, click campaign and donation spent. You can see how we've spent our money. I've got my cash on hand up there. We're going to need a lot of money. We don't have nearly as much as we need. Yeah. Now, my campaign is a lot different than Tom Cotton's. It's not just spending $3.5 million on God knows what. It's all of our money is being spent in the most efficient ways possible. We will have to start doing advertising here soon. So, if you guys can afford to donate even $5 or $1, every bit helps.
Yeah, I definitely think it's worth the investment. Dan, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed hearing what you had to say today. One of my favorite interviews here, because we went into some really interesting ideas. And this is a really big race. I don't know if you all are aware of how bad Tom Cotton is, but give it a Google. I'm sure you might have a little bit of reason on your website, being that it is replacetomcotton.com. But
I try not to focus on the negatives. I mean, some things. Number one, he put out an op-ed saying to use no quarter against American citizens. He was the one saying we need an overwhelming show of force against the protesters. He's not a good dude. He took $8.5 million from the Koch brothers in 2014. $8.5 million from a billionaire family.
This is exactly it. Like there's bad reasons for Tom Cotton. And if you were listening today, there's a lot of good innovation on your platform, Dan. So I'm really thankful for getting to speak with you today. I know I'm going to be a contributor. I don't say that on every interview, but you wowed me today. So I'll be a contributor.
Thank you, John.
As well. And, just a final note, Rosebuds, I want to give a programming update because we got a lot of good stuff coming this week. So on top of what we had today with Dan, we're continuing to want to interview candidates and former candidates on the program. So we'll be speaking with Noel Famara from Hawaii's 2nd District tomorrow. Then on Thursday, we're going to be speaking with Marianne Williamson. Then on Friday, we have a couple of flex options. We might have another interview then. So we'll stay tuned to that. We'll let you know later in the week. And then, on top of what I do here on the channel, we got our whole network building out new content. So if you go to thehillofroses.com, you're going to see our newest articles from Elenis Torres-Pepito, where she wrote about civil rights and economic survival. Always and especially now, we must consider both, as well as, pieces from David Walker on the Libertarian Party, as well as, the difference between riots and protests from Brianna Cardenas. So we have a lot of content here. And as you might have heard today on our announcement, we're having Heidi Briones, the former candidate from Oregon's 1st District, become my co-host in the future. So this is going to be a really interesting thing where we do the full bloom here on the channel. So we got a lot of cool stuff beyond just this stream. But once again, thank you all for tuning in today and listening to Dan's platform. And Dan, once again, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, John. You have a good night. It was a pleasure.
Yes, as you as well. Rosebuds, I hope you're all staying safe out there. And as always, I hope you're staying rosy.